John Creuzot is a retired criminal court judge, former Dallas County prosecutor, and attorney now in private practice. He knows criminal cases and grand juries too. This is unfair because you weren't in with the grand jury, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Sorry,
Okay.
Did the grand jury get it right? And you can take that wherever you want.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't hear everything that they heard, but it seems as though they took a lot of time and effort and care to hear from all of the witnesses and to come up with a decision, and they've done so in this case.
District Attorney talked a lot about kind of conflicting testimony with witnesses, specifically talking at one point about the struggle between the officer in the car and the one who was killed, Michael Brown, in there. And then some of it is a shot rang out inside the car, some of it when he was standing back and shot through the window. Is that common to have differing accounts from witnesses in grand jury?
It is. It's common when you go to trial, and that's
even in
why
the
you
trial,
often
yeah.
go to trial, because there's conflicts in testimony. And so the issue becomes which conflicting testimony a witness from the other is more believable, and that's how you resolve cases.
And that's the same with the grand jury? A grand jury
Absolutely.
decides which witness they believe?
Well, ordinarily, grand juries don't give this much attention to a case, but because of the issues involved, it's a police shooting, and of course the national attention that this case has been given, it appears that they probably heard from each and every witness that was there, and so they put more into it than the average case.
And you said, I don't mean to really judge this in any way, but you said in Dallas County murder, a cop just goes in and kind of reads the police report, and a grand jury might.
On the average case, probably one witness will be called.
Okay.
On the average case.
And that one witness may be.
It's usually a police officer, yes.
All right. Difficult to charge a police officer?
Oh yeah, it is. Especially when you have issues of struggle, you have issues of self-defense, you have issues of intention. Did they intend for the gun to go off? Did it go off accidentally? Things like that. That's not necessarily in this case.
Sure.
But you may have issues of a struggle. It may be inside or outside of a vehicle. It doesn't matter. People give leeway to a police officer because every day they put their lives on the line, and they carry guns for a reason, and people respond in ways that they can't know ahead of time, and so they have to respond immediately and react immediately. And sometimes people are killed, they're injured. Most often, of course, people are arrested without any of that. But when it does happen, I think that society is willing to give them a little bit of leeway on that. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it wasn't a criminal offense committed, but as you see across the United States, a lot of these cases are no billed or no indictment returned in these cases.
There's also a racial component to this, and I think everybody knows that. What's your take on how that might have affected the grand jury's decision, if at all?
Well, I hope not at all. I hope they looked at the witnesses and determined there was no probable cause that this officer committed a criminal act. I would hope that's it.
And to that, I saw a lot of people on TV, and they weren't in the grand jury room, so they didn't affect the grand jurors, but saying, for the good of the community, to make the community feel better, this officer needs to be charged. Yeah. And what do you think about that? That was a lot out there.
Charged is one thing. That is, give it to the grand jury and let them hear it. Indicted may be something else. No one should be indicted to send a message to the community. They should only be indicted if there's probable cause to believe that they committed a criminal offense. Can
the feds now, and the prosecutor, the DA, kind of referenced the federal involvement and how he was happy. I think he was, I don't know if he was trying to cut off any future federal involvement, trying to say how involved Attorney General Eric Holder was. But is there a possibility now that the feds get involved in open an investigation or bring charges on their own?
Yes. You have state and federal jurisdictions, and even if the state had indicted this man, the federal jurisdiction can still bring charges if they want to. And they probably will look at it or continue to look at it. And I think probably what he's trying to do is to say that everybody has done an exhaustive examination of this, and please accept this as finality. That may be what he's trying to do.
What do we know about what happens in the grand juries? You told me as a judge, you never were in there, and as a prosecutor, the judge was never involved. A judge is not in a grand jury room. It's just the grand jurors and the witness and the presenter, I guess.
Yes. In the state of Texas, the only person who's in there to present evidence would be the prosecutor and whatever witness or witnesses that would be there. The judge is never involved. I've paneled, I don't know, dozens of grand juries over 22 years, and the most ever happened was somebody asked me a question of law, about some law. But to go down and be a part of it, that's not the process. No.
Does it need to be unanimous? How does that usually break down? Do all grand jurors have to be on the same page, and it needs to be unanimous?
No, it doesn't need to be unanimous as a finding of guilt or not guilt. Okay. It doesn't need to be that way. It's usually in the state of Texas you need 9 votes to true bill someone.
9 out
Out of 12.
of 12
Yeah.
to come up with an indictment.
Yes.
And I don't know, do they make a foreman? Is there somebody kind of who runs the show in a grand jury situation?
Usually, I would
I
expect.
may be miscategorizing as run the show, but a foreman who
Well,
kind
a
of-
foreman who presides
is
and probably
organized.
signs the final document, whether it's a true bill or a no bill.
Okay.
It usually is a foreperson.
And the length of this, do you think was important maybe to grand jurors? They knew when I don't believe they were sequestered, so they probably knew the gravity of this situation, and they have to keep that in mind, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's no way they can get around that. They know what's going on.
Yes, I mean, their average day, probably they hear 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 cases, and then they spend a number of days on one case. They know that's different. They're in the community. They're not sequestered, as you said, and so they understand which case it is and the gravity of it. They understand the importance of it to the community.
And would you be inclined to try to protect them in this kind of case? Keep them, I mean, they're supposed to be kept secret, but would you be inclined to really work to make sure their identities are kept secret?
I hadn't thought about that, but I guess if they requested it, I would. It wouldn't really be up to me because a judge doesn't have any of those types of powers, but it would be up to local law enforcement to give them protection, such as a sheriff's department or police department.
Sure, but I mean, as a prosecutor, would you tell people, if this were your case and you had just presented, although the prosecution was asking for charges, which is an interesting thing, but usually you know the grand jury and the witnesses, would you be inclined to say, you probably don't want to talk about this with the gravity of this case?
I would encourage them to not talk about it, yes. In fact, actually, the law is they're supposed to keep secret everything that goes on in the grand jury.
Really, they can't,
Yes.
we'll never really know specifics supposedly about what happened in the grand
Very
jury.
rare exceptions, but ordinarily it's kept secret.
So, get one last overview as we watch the live pictures.
Okay.
You think it played out the way it should? Again, we weren't in there, but from what you're hearing,
I hope it played. I don't know. I mean, I
just no
hope
way
it
to know,
played
right?
out. I hope it played out the way it should.
yeah.
I hope that there's no probable cause to believe that he committed any
Well,
criminal
what do you tell
offense.
people who aren't satisfied tonight? how
Well,
it
the
turned out?
process appears to have played out correctly in that they presented everything, it seems. And the grand jury was given all of the evidence, and so you'll have to trust that they came up with a good decision. However, if you're not satisfied with it, the federal government likely is continuing an investigation, and they can bring their own charges.
Okay. Judge Creuzot, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know it's tough when you're not being in there, but you've been there, and so you know
Yes.
how it works. We appreciate your expertise. We are going to keep monitoring the situation in Ferguson, Missouri throughout the evening and throughout this broadcast. We're going to bring you the remarks from President Obama in just a few minutes, so you want to stick with us, and we'll bring you any developments that happen throughout our newscast and again on Fox 4 News at 10. Also online, our website is myfoxdfw.com.